All right, that's enough procrastinating. All right, so we've been kind of putting this off just because, yeah, I'm not really sure if I want to start cutting into this car, but it's kind of holding up a lot of other projects at the moment, so I need to get this done. And also we've been busy with like random other things, but yeah, I need to get this out of the way, so let's just start taking it apart. Gonna take this little trim piece off and be extra careful trying to get these little clips off because I was gonna order some more and apparently they're $30. So don't break these. Now the weather stripping. Now there's a whole wiring harness for the taillights coming back here, so we gotta get that out of the way. We don't want to cut through that. This one's probably going to be more tedious because we have to reuse everything. Just noticed that there's like a huge gash in the panel here. We hadn't even noticed that. All right, now we gotta get the taillight out, and there's this like gross black silicone junk that Nissan puts around the housing to like seal it from water, I guess. I don't know, but it's a pain in the ass. So you can try to like, I'm gonna use this and just try to like cut some of it as far around as I can. If that doesn't work, I think you can also use a heat gun and like soften it up, and that should make it easier, which we might have to do since it's kind of cold in here. All right, now for the fun part. Fun and scary part.
You're great! Good luck! Woo!
Sheesh. That cuts very easily. Oh, I'm not turning back now. Taking the heat shield off. All right, this kind of thing doesn't usually bother me, but this is really freaking loud and like physically hurts your eardrums, so protection. And so there's a better look at what exactly is wrong with this one. You can compare it to the nice straight one. So another thing we can see now is that the back end of the quarter panel isn't straight anymore either. It's got a little curve to it. That, along with the floor section here, is pushed up. So this would have been why the side of the corner panel had a buckle in it, because this was not in the original position. It just kind of makes me think back that I shouldn't have messed with that in the first place at all, because just from fixing this, that probably would have fixed itself, because when you cut all the stuff that's like keeping the panel in tension, once that tension is released, the panel will tend to like go back to its original shape, but a little late for that. Okay, I think that's about all we can cut off without ruining stuff. I mean, kind of got carried away a little bit already in a couple of spots. It'll be fine. Now we just gotta get a wire brush and start grinding away all the seam sealers so we can see all the spot welds, and then drill out a bazillion spot welds. But hey, at least it's not 2 bazillion spot welds because we cut most of the other stuff out, so that's a plus. So let's get started. Okay, that's pretty much it for all the seam sealer. We got everything ground away. So now just back to the hole punch and spot weld drilling for probably the next couple hours. Okay, spot welds aren't nearly as fun as they were when we started. I got all the pieces of the floor drilled out and it's all pretty much clear. I still got to take out the pieces of the frame rails that are left, but we can at least test fit the trunk floor now. Or now we can test fit the trunk floor. Oof. Headphone users, cover your ears. Okay, we have a problem. It's kind of what I was afraid of. This side is still damaged. So you can see we still have a good, I don't know, ½ inch, three-quarter inch gap there. And all the way out here to the end of the quarter panel. And we really don't have any further to move up. On the left side, it looks fine. So that tells me that with the impact, it pushed the entire quarter panel forward, which explains why we had such a big, you know, buckle in the middle of the quarter panel. But we're not gonna be able to put this on until we try and get this closer to where it's supposed to be. Got to get creative with this one. So we basically need to pull this whole section this way. So what I'm thinking is we try and clamp something to this piece and see if we can pull it with our frame puller, aka the Armada. I think that might work. So this is just like a bench vise, but for our drill press. I think this is the only thing I have that might work to actually get this done. Because you don't want to necessarily like just bolt a chain to the sheet metal because it's so thin. You'll probably just rip the bolt out along with part of the sheet metal. So you want something that can grab a larger area. So I'm thinking if we try and pull this whole edge, we might pull this with it. Here. Okay, we have a chain that may or may not work. So this feels like a very YouTube thing to do. It's like either this whole section is gonna come ripping off or this whole bumper is gonna fall off. Yeah, place your bets. This means stop. And then go like this. That means keep going and then stop. Slowly. Ray. Oh my God. No. Okay. Cool. Oh. I'd help if the car had the handbrake on. Again. Oh, hold on. Okay, so it really comes in handy that we have a whole other car that isn't crashed, so we can make sure stuff is in the right place. So what I'm gonna try to do is just measure from somewhere and see if we can compare it to the other car. So I think most of this was compromised, so I need to pick something a little further away. So I'm gonna try and go from the edge of this grommet to the edge of the over fender or quarter panel. And we have about 27 and 5/8, 3/4, somewhere around there. Now let's check the other one. Okay, so edge of this grommet to the edge of the quarter panel, we have a little over 27 and 3/4. So that means we still got a little bit more to go on that one. Just a little bit more. So from here to here should measure 54. And that's bang on 54. And here should be 51. We're bang on 51. So that meant that there was something else wrong. And then I remember that I bent this piece to get out of the way, but that actually bent it more in the way, and this is what wasn't letting the trunk sit flush this way, because this was pushing it that way. So we should probably finish taking these off.
Been saving these for a special occasion.
It's just different size drill bits. If you go through drilling all these out, you'll notice some of them are a little larger than others, and some are smaller. So there's actually a 6.5 millimeter, an 8 millimeter, and a 10 millimeter, and that should pretty much cover all the different sizes. I like this larger 10 mil one because then if it walks a little bit, which all these, that's my one complaint with all these drill bits, is that the point after a while starts to dull, and then the whole drill bit will walk a little bit, and then part of your spot weld won't get drilled out, and then it's hard to get it apart. But if you oversize it a little bit, then even if it walks, you have a better chance of getting the whole spot weld. So this has helped a little bit. Okay, we got everything mocked up again, and it looks a lot better. It's still a little bit off, which now I still can't really figure out why. Everything measures out like it's supposed to compared to the not so crashed car. But we're still like, I don't know, 1/4 inch off, which I'm hoping I'm able to like just stretch into place as we go or something. But I mean, it looks like a floor again, so that's a plus. So the other issue is that I'm not sure if the frame rails are supposed to go in first, because I mean that would make more sense to me, because then you can weld the spot welds in more easily. But to put the floor in, I've been having to like angle it from underneath and get it into place and back up. So if I had the frame rails in place when I do that, I wouldn't be able to get the floor in. At least I don't think I would. There's a chance it might just like slide in, but I'm not sure. Because if I put the floor in first and then try to put the frame rails, I don't think I'd be able to weld these side spot welds, because the floor would be in the way. Which leads me to think that this isn't the way this car went together initially. Like there's probably none of the side stuff in the way when they first make this, but we're gonna have to figure it out. So another issue that I've noticed is that when you're putting this back together, you tend to want to match the spot welds back up to each other, and I don't think that's the correct way to do it, because all the spot welds are in really similar places, but they're not in the exact same places. I mean, these are all, I'm pretty sure these were all just hand done, and whoever did these is just, you know, going more or less along where they're supposed to go, but they're not in exactly the same spot every time. So I keep having to remind myself not to try and match these two up, because it doesn't seem like that's where they're supposed to go. Obviously if we were trying to put the same panel back in, then yeah, that would be the perfect way to get it lined back up, because the original panel would match up, but since this is from another car, they don't really match up. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Okay, so I had the floor in here all stretched out and like into place, and all the dowels where they needed to go and everything, because I was pretty sure I could weld the frame in that position, and then I realized I couldn't weld the frame in that position. Partially because the frame rail, I needed to put a clamp on it to get this side to like hug the frame rail coming out of the car tightly, and with the clamp there, I mean, it was going to be a stretch to try and get to these two top spots anyway, but with the clamp there, it just wasn't going to happen. So then I figured if I only do one side, and if I can slide the floor out with the frame rail in this position, then it should be okay. And yeah, I managed to slide the floor out with the frame rail there, so it shouldn't be too big of a pain in the ass to slide it back in once those are welded up. Because the other side, I for sure can weld it with the floor there, because there's a lot more space next to that frame rail than there is over here. Because the spare tire sits like literally like right next to this frame rail, whereas on that side you have the exhaust and it kind of like tapers more gradually, so you have more room to weld on that side. But yeah, it should work if we do it this way. So I lined it up. I put the back panel back in place so I can get the frame rail in like a close enough area. So that's about where it goes, and I have it supported with the jack. So that way when we weld it on that side, it's not gonna be like way off or something. All right, so now we can start welding that section. I don't really know why you have to disconnect the battery. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you're like welding on the chassis of a car. The chassis is the ground to the electrical circuit of the car, but I mean, the current from the welder is like self-contained, because it's going from the welding gun to the welder's ground, so it shouldn't interfere. I don't know, have you guys ever had any issues welding on a car like that? Like, does it actually fry the ECU or something? Because I've never heard about it, but I always heard from everyone that you're supposed to disconnect the battery. So I figured it's gotta be for a reason. Even better, we don't have a battery at all, so we're good to go. Just need to attach our ground to somewhere. I'm gonna try and pick a spot that has no paint or something. I hate these gloves. I don't usually wear gloves when I'm welding, because I don't weld for very long or that often. Then I always end up getting sunburnt, even though I'm only welding for like a few seconds at a time. And also your hands stink like argon. And according to my wife here, I smell like old swing sets that have been sitting out in the sun. So, yeah. All right, a little ugly, but that'll do. Should probably try and clean off more of the paint and underbody coating and junk. Hopefully we can get the floor back in place. It takes a really long time to get all this lined up, because, well, yeah, nothing's like secured in place, so everything still kind of moves around a bit. So I got all 4 dowels screwed into each corner, so that's basically holding the trunk floor where it's supposed to go. Now I'm trying to line up the frame rails with the holes in that we drilled out from the other car, because these two should line up. The frame rails and the floor pan should line up, because they came out of the same car. They were, you know, one piece before. But we had to weld this side from that back section, and it's close, but it doesn't line up perfectly with everything loose. So I think what I'm gonna try to do is tack this side in place, and then try and like pry this one in position, because it doesn't move a whole lot anymore. Obviously we welded the back section, or we started to weld the back section. So I need to like pry this and get it into position. But if I do that now, it would move everything else out of position. So I'm gonna try and tack this one and probably just start tacking the whole thing and then come back to this one. Because this one, the part that helps with this one is that it has screws built into it. So I don't know why the other side doesn't have these, but this really helps to like keep it in place before you weld it. But unfortunately this side doesn't have that. So I think that's what we're gonna have to do. And another thing I want to talk about is the welder that we're using. This isn't a particularly fancy welder or anything. I think this is like a super entry-level Lincoln. It's a Pro MIG 140. I just bought this for 200 bucks off of AZ240, a local forum like years ago. And that's what I've been using. You just want something that can accept gas. So like a shielding gas, like this one uses C25, I think, so argon CO2 mix. And I'm using 0.025 wire because all the sheet metal on this thing is like 18 to 20 gauge, I think. And that's about what we want to use. I had 030 wire in here before. And if you look at the recommended size for that gauge, it's like with the 30 thousandths wire, it was like the speed at 0.5 and the heat at C. I'm like, probably just gonna melt through everything. So we decided to step down to 025, and that gives us a higher wire speed at the same heat. So it seemed to work all right on the frame rail. So we'll give it a shot. Okay, behold all the boogers. So I'm pretty much done welding up the trunk floor. But if you guys will recall from the disassembly video, the blue S14, there's a few spots where we ended up drilling all the way through. And I was trying to figure out what the best way to fill those is. And thanks to our buddy John, he suggested that I use a block of aluminum and hold that up against the underside of the hole, and that gives you a surface to support the weld as you're trying to close up the hole, and that'll keep it from just dropping out from under you. So that works phenomenally, so really recommend that. So we're gonna do that method on these two right here, then we'll be done.
Yeah, you can let go now. You can let go now.
Okay, so I'm putting the trunk latch back on just so we can get an idea of if the panel's in the right place or not. This is the last thing we want is to weld this whole thing like half an inch that way and have the trunk not line up at all. I mean, both the latch and the other latch, I don't know. They both have a little bit of adjustment, but not a whole lot. So we need it to be in the ballpark to begin with. I don't know which one's the latch. They're both latches? I don't know. But this is the original one that was on the car, and that was damaged because of the whole accident. So it's a little beat up. I think that might have been part of the problem originally too, is that this thing was getting kind of stuck because I didn't notice that some of the metal under here was like touching the linkage. And so that wasn't letting it release consistently. And I just straightened this out a bit, and also the trunk, I noticed the gap was way closer on this side, so that was pushing the whole panel this way. So then I bent the whole trunk to the right a little bit, try and center it, and it looks better now. As you can see, the gap is more even on both sides, and it latches okay now. I've just noticed that. So anyone else that's ever had an S14, I know that you've noticed that your trunk never fits absolutely perfectly to your quarter panels. And I've just realized that it's because of this panel. Because I've always tried to like, even on my other one and my friend's S14, I try to like adjust the little stops, but they don't really have any adjustment. They're just kind of there. And then the trunk latch, I would max out the adjustment on that to put it lower, but it still wouldn't let it sit lower than here. And it's because this whole panel needs to be brought down to hold the trunk flush with the quarter panel when it's closed. So I'm definitely gonna pay extra attention to that and make sure I weld it a little lower so that when it latches, the body lines are actually perfect. Because that's always bothered me on these cars. So yeah, it'll be better than stock when we're done. So I got it more or less lined up, and I tacked it in a couple places and put our little bar at the bottom where it fit. And I think we got it working now. So as you can see, body lines are perfect. Panel gaps, perfect. And it opens. I think I'll call that a win. So now we just gotta finish welding it up everywhere. Like I said, these spots aren't gonna match up to the previous spot welds, but as long as like the main things match up, I mean, mainly the trunk closing, everything else doesn't really matter. I mean, at the factory, they just literally just grab it in generally the right area and just weld it in. So I guess back to welding for another couple hours. Okay, I got the whole thing boogered up now. Now let's see if everything still fits. It's like nothing ever happened. All right, that's gonna do it for this episode. Obviously, it's still a little ugly under all this. So in the next episode, we're gonna be doing all the bodywork side of this, because obviously I don't wanna leave the trunk floor and stuff that we just put on all rusty and ugly. We're probably gonna be sanding down all these boogers that I put on it, and then putting some seam sealer, sanding it, painting it with something. So yeah, that's gonna be the next episode, which hopefully won't be in another month. Or will it? I don't know. But thank you guys for almost getting us to 1,000 subscribers. We only got a little bit left to go. So thank you guys so much. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.